Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Recollection Step, a Grand Archive TCG podcast, part of the Maindeck podcast family. I'm Dan.
And I'm Taylor. Dan, what have you been up to the past couple weeks?
Well, I have... so here's the unfortunate thing. I've been playing way less Grand Archive than I want to. That's been the main issue, because Singapore is coming up. I need to be testing a lot more than I have been, but we've had...
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the problem. You're gonna be really disappointed in me if I don't get some serious testing in here soon. But that's the plan. We got a little training regimen that we're about to start, so that'll help a little bit. But yeah, it's been like the launch of the Altered TCG came out, so that's been like kind of a big thing, and just
super fun there.
That's been you've been dabbling a little. I've been dabbling a little. Been a really fun game to play with. Really enjoying that one as well. This problem is too many good TCGs.
Yeah, very much so.
But otherwise, just recovering from Gen Cons. It took a little while to get kind of back into a rhythm, but been launching a few videos in a bit more of a rhythm now, getting things kind of figured out. How about you, Taylor?
Yeah, I mean, I it's kind of the same story for me almost. Well, and actually not the same story. Same kind of like, feeling of not playing enough Grand Archive over the past couple of weeks. Just haven't, unfortunately, had the time, but I haven't been making videos. I haven't been making content. So, I've got that going for me. But yeah, Altered came out and that was really cool. Been enjoying that. Got my Kickstarter product for that in. I won't go into that too much because you've got a whole another podcast for that anyway. So, but that game's a ton of fun. And we've been trying to sell our house here, and so that's been taking up a ton of time as well. So we're just like got some life events going on that are just really...
Was that to afford your Mortal Ambition pre-order?
Yes. Yeah, obviously.
That makes sense.
Thankfully I can move back in with my parents for a while until I can get back on my feet again after that. So but yeah, so it's been pretty hectic for me as well. So unfortunately, I have not had as much time to play a Grand Archive as I usually like. But honestly, I was kind of ready for a little bit of a break anyway. I was kind of going hard going into Chicago, and kind of coming out of that. So
you guys were like pre-Chicago. You guys were seriously. Like for a second, I thought that you guys had swapped places with True Champion Gaming. how much you guys were grinding, but obviously it paid off for the team very well. But I think I want to stress that it's really important to normalize taking the ebb and flow of the game as it goes. It's okay to rest. It's okay to take a break. You don't need to be at every single locals that takes place. You don't need to be thinking about the same game 24/7. And sometimes it's really nice to take a rest, reset your mind, and then get back to things when things get exciting again.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, like this is kind of like the exciting time. Like even though Altered is like coming out and stuff, I'm hyped about that as well. But like my main game is going to be Grand Archive for the foreseeable future for quite a while. Just because it's so much, it hits every single itch for me right now. It's like it's incredibly fun. The flavor is great. The art's great. It's very competitive, which I love. Like the OP circuit is on point. I'm gonna actually, I'm just gonna go out there and say this right now. Grand Archive has the single best organized play structure from top to bottom of any trading card game on the market right now. And some people probably disagree with that, and I think there's some other games that do have some like pretty strong contentions to that argument. But it just everything that Weebs is doing right now is just on point for a lot of these events, and the speed in which they were able to ramp up to holding these high level cash prize events, all over the world is pretty incredible compared to what we were seeing from other like actually big names in the industry.
I think that is so important to point out to people. And I think that is one of the most underappreciated elements of Grand Archive. And it's not that people don't appreciate it, because like we've been talking about the OP structure for a long time. There are definitely people who have been like hitting the big events. They're like, yeah, this is great. Like they understand what's going into this. But I think people, there are probably a number of our listeners, a number of players out there who don't necessarily have the breadth of experience seeing how other TCG companies work. And if you check out other TCGs, you might end up feeling like you were a bit spoiled by Weebs of the Shore, and how like going from Kickstarter to the launch to the OP circuit they have. I like you said, there are major companies that can't put that together in that speed and when they do put it together, it's still worse than what Weaves of the Shore put together.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they have their own OP software website and it's better.
It's very good. It is
almost every other one.
It is insane how well the software runs. Like we've run into zero hitches. I think like the only time there's really been major issues with it there was like in the very beginning life of this Omnideck software is like they tried it out at some larger tournaments to like, really put it through its paces. And we saw a couple hiccups there at a couple of those bigger events, but it has been like flawless since then. And the amount of like features in it is insane. Like it puts like stuff like, I'm going to throw some shade at Wizards because they kind of deserve it. Like their Magic Companion app and their tournament software is horrendous. And the fact that like this company of 10 people or something has been able to put this together and get this going and have it running super duper well is like honestly kind of embarrassing to like a lot of the rest of the industry. Like if you're serious about having like these organized play, like these large events and this large structure and this overarching kind of like tournament season, the fact that like you don't have things that run that well is just like a really kind of a pretty big like mark against kind of your reputation, and to see like Weebs nail it is just so encouraging for the direction of the game.
Did you know, Taylor? So part of my role at or LGS now at JWW Sports Cards and Gaming is I coordinate all our events. So I'm in charge of making sure we're getting the product in for registering for everything, signing up for it all, putting on the schedule, managing the event calendar. When I have to set up Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, I have to go through 3 different websites just to get a tournament set up, basically to get the promos. I have to like get the promos requested through one, and then I have to get them ordered through a second one. Don't know why. And then the tournament actually has to be created in the third one. And then sometimes the report then goes back to the first website to report the tournament from the third website after it's completed. And like, it's stuff like that. That's like, I think there's an argument that people will make that, it's so much bigger. There's so much more that they have to manage, so many more stores and players and everything. And that's true. And they also have the money of so many more stores and players. It's capital. It's something that I don't think is truly just excusable by scale alone. It's really hard to me. It doesn't really make sense to say, well, they're just bigger. Then like, okay, then put more money into it, because Weebs is microscopic compared to Konami.
Yeah.
And they started out, they said, let's do it right. We need more companies that say, let's do it right.
Exactly.
And then do that.
Yeah. I mean, the money is not a problem. Like we can see the balance sheet for Hasbro. Like we know exactly what they're bringing in because it's publicly traded. Right. And I'm not sure if Bandai is the same way, but like the money is not a problem for these larger companies. It's insane. Anyway, sorry. We got off on a little bit of a tangent there, talking about, what ended up just being talking about like breaks from the game.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm hyped to like dive back into it again as we're helping you get ready for Singapore, as Mortal Ambition spoilers are kind of coming up, and we're seeing some new cards trickle out for that.
Can I say something real quick? A little tease.
Absolutely.
There will be a spoiler season, of course, for Mortal Ambition.
Obviously.
We will be involved, of course. And
thank goodness.
Listeners, you are absolutely not going to want to miss our spoilers. You don't want to miss our video. Okay. That's all I can say. I'm extremely excited.
I don't even know what Dan's talking about right now. I haven't.
Yeah. Of course, I'm the only one who's seen them.
Dan's keeping us all in the dark.
The Dan's eyes only, but it's going to be good.
I'm very excited for this. But yeah, anyway, so I mean, as we we're kind of ramping up here into the end of the Mercurial art season, and getting to the point where, the metagame has really kind of like solidified, I would say. But we have had kind of a little bit of a shake up here for the last couple of weeks. Actually, I mean, we still have like last month plus of events, including some like larger regionals, Ascent Singapore, obviously, a bunch of store championships. And is being shaken up by a new ban and restricted announcement that Weebs released on Monday, on Labor Day. So also on Labor Day. So thank you, Weebs, for taking the time on the holiday even to release this for us. But anyway, Dan, before we really dive into these changes and kind of what that looks like, how can you tell us how listeners can help support the channel and the podcast?
I always can. I'm always happy to as well.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for all of the ways that you do support us, which usually will include liking the video, subscribing to the channel, commenting on the video, sharing it with your friends, watching the video 1 million times. If you do that, that's really cool too. I've never mentioned that one, but no, I appreciate all of those things that you do. Thank you guys so much. We've felt a lot of support at Recollection Step. It's been really great. Love seeing the enthusiastic comments when our videos go live. People really like some of the series. Taylor, the mastermind behind Recollection Step, to be honest, it looks like I am, but Taylor's actually the planner for this. So, if you want to leave a comment down below, just saying, "Hey, good on you, Taylor. Thanks, Taylor. Cheers, Taylor." I think he would like that. So that would be one way to support us. Yeah,
or,
there we go.
Leave a comment saying if you want something different, or if you got if there's some topics you really want us to go over, leave comments for that as well. Because we're always looking for ideas. We want to put these out every 2 weeks regularly for you guys. So
yeah,
and we want to make sure it's stuff that's relevant to what your interests are. So.
Taylor's good ideas won't last forever. That's just the truth.
I mean, I'm getting older. My mind is going to start going here at some point. Like, I might end up with dementia here shortly.
Yeah. We need some help, especially with the amount of slimes he's had to play against. The dementia rate has been increasing massively. So that's all super helpful. Thank you for that, and really appreciate any comments on kind of what you guys like to see in the future. That'd be great. And if you want to support us financially, of course, you can always shop on TCG Player for your singles, and jwwcards.com for your sealed product. I don't usually mention that one, but that's probably a good one to mention too. But if you go to tcgplayer.com to shop for singles, just make sure you go to our affiliate link instead, which is bit.ly/shoptcgs. That's bit.ly/shoptcgs. Thank you so much for your support.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan. So yeah, we're gonna dive into this ban and restricted list announcement here. We aren't really gonna go over the mechanics of it. We've done that in a past episode, so I'll direct you to watch that as well if you are new to the game or new to ban and restricted lists or what have you, and are just kind of curious about how all of this works. Check that episode out. But yeah, for the September list here, we had Gaia's Blessing move to Category 1. Which I think was kind of expected. We've seen slimes be pretty dominant throughout the metagame since Ascent Chicago. We had Chalice of Blood move to Category 2. Not necessarily because of it doesn't appear from what I've seen with metagame results that it's been seeing widespread play, but it is just like a really powerful card and kind of limits design space and restricts what weebs can print in the future. At least that's a paraphrase of the reason they gave for moving that up here. Because it was previously at Category 1.
Yeah, Chalice of Blood started to see more play right when Tony released too. Yeah. Because we had a higher... The balance to Chalice of Blood was always that 25 or 28 if you were Lorraine was the health threshold, really, that at level 3. And so you had just a little bit of wiggle room to work with on there, but I think we started to see that, okay, if they're going to start increasing health costs more, having more effects that, just allow you to have some sort of extra health buffer or whatever, that will start to make Chalice of Blood almost a freebie at some point in the game, just basically saying, well, you slot this in your teal deck, then some point when you still probably have several turns left, you're going to get to draw 3 cards on a turn instead of just, 1 and whatever you materialize. Which, yeah, feels like something that would limit exactly what they can toy around with, especially in the realm of like character health and similar effects.
Yeah. Even like recover effects are super good with it. Like you go to 20, 21 or whatever, draw 2 cards, you get a big recover effect. Now all of a sudden you're at a very safe life total again. Like we've seen that with the Serene Spirits, obviously.
Yeah.
And we're seeing, just random things like Fast Cure, Revitalizing Cleanse, like, just being able to print cards like that in the future is nice without like making Chalice of Blood a huge problem.
I think that design space in particular around character levels and that doesn't just mean level 3s, but level 1s with unique balancing factors on them certainly can play into how powerful Chalice is. And I would prefer to get more cool new character levels than have a Chalice of Blood exist in the format if that's going to be the problem. Like,
yeah, that's an easy trade to make.
Yeah.
And then for the kind of the big actual news of the banned and restricted announcement is that Korhazi Outlook is now banned, which is sad news for Tristan players everywhere, but probably good news for everybody else. This is kind of Korhazi Outlook is kind of a weird card. I think in the past, actually, I really didn't think it was that big of an issue as far as kind of creating like problems for stopping interaction and stuff. Because oftentimes, like, you had to, you often play it out early sometimes to just get the prep counter, so you have ways to deal with it. Oftentimes too, like just it like playing a 2-cost 1/3 is like not really a card you want to play all the time. It's not like it has a huge impact when it's like ready to counter something or stop your opponent from doing something. But if it's not doing anything at all, it's like it's just not an excellent card. I mean, obviously that's kind of a redundant thing to say. If a card doesn't do anything, of course, it's not excellent. But I mean, just like a 1/3 for 2 on its own is just not great. Even if it's giving you a prep counter, like it's kind of whatever. You really need that effect to be relevant, and it's really only relevant in kind of like these matchups that have a lot of interaction. Like going into kind of like Nico, going into Merlin. I say Merlin doesn't actually have like a ton of interaction either, but it has things it can do, and it sideboards into pretty specific cards. So like Korhazi Outlook can just shut a lot of that stuff down. We've seen like decks in the past, like Luxem Xander, which has like a fair amount of interactive cards. Can really just shut that deck down pretty well when it needs to try and stop like a lethal Shadow Strike. So I kind of see what's going on. But for me, really, I was thinking about this actually earlier this week. The thing that really puts it over the edge for me is that how much interaction it forces, or like not interaction, but how much it forces your opponent to make suboptimal plays just to play around it. And that's something I hadn't really considered too much beforehand because I hadn't played a ton of Tristan. Actually, you know what? Oh, hold up. I'm gonna back up 1 second. I'm gonna just fully read this card out because I haven't done that yet.
You're right. And we forgot to do that.
There's probably some listeners that are not as familiar. So it is a 2-cost wind ally, assassin human with on enter, put a preparation counter on your champion, and class bonus, remove a preparation counter from your champion. Opponents cannot activate cards this turn. Glimpse 1, and also activate this ability only during your turn. So what that essentially means is you activate this ability. You can activate it at fast speed, only during your turn, and then once that ability resolves, your opponents cannot play any more cards from their hand, or any way you would activate them for the rest of the turn. They can still activate abilities of cards. So like if they have an ally out, like a Korhazi Trapper that lets you give an attack -3 power, they can still activate that. Because that's activating an ability, not activating a card. But they can't be playing like Fast Cures. They can't play Vanish from Sight. They can't play Song of Frost. Any of these fast speed spells they might use to stop an attack. So yeah, I mean, it's going back to kind of why, like the mini epiphany I had earlier, where it really just forces your opponent to make a ton of like suboptimal plays throughout the game, just to kind of like make sure you aren't like dying to a random shadow strike out of nowhere. And the first one isn't even like, it's not even just like playing Outlook on the turn you're going to shadow strike. It's just playing Outlook for some, like, just to get a prep counter earlier in the game. Because you can play it like once you get to level 2 and you play an Outlook, like your opponent now kind of needs to deal with it pretty quickly. Otherwise, they're just, you're just sitting there threatening to end the game if you have 7 other cards in hand, because then you can go Mastermind Scheme to double your prep counters and play Shadow Strike to attack for 1,000,000 damage. So you really don't need a lot of like cards to make this in hand to make this like a really threatening card. And now all of a sudden your opponent's just making, doing whatever they can to get rid of it, which means like they're probably really changing up their game plan, which of course then you're like causing some unforced errors, and you can kind of take advantage of that as Tristan and continue to snowball an advantage. So for me, that really kind of like, after I thought about that a little bit more, I was like, yeah, no, I'm a little bit more excited to see this get banned now.
I think the way I look at the card and its banning right now, because I was always high on the Korhazi cycle. When Fractured Crown came out, I did a series of videos with top 5 things, and my number 1 meta shifting card for Fractured Crown, I cheated and put the entire cycle of the Korhazi cards. I was a little ahead of my time. Okay. I was like the scene in Back to the Future, like I didn't get it now, but nobody got it now, but my kids are going to love it, or your kids are going to love it, or whatever. Right. That was the idea. But it turned out that Arsonist ended up being a pretty used card for trying to get through Merlin during that sort of Fractured Crown metagame when you're trying to play the more aggressive fire decks. And then Trapper had a whole life of its own with Water Allies. And now finally, Korhazi Outlook, it has shown its face and become quite a threatening card. And I think the reason why now it starts to become a real problem is not, I mean, obviously it's because of Tristan, but like, why is kind of the question. Like, why did the card itself, what is it about Tristan that got the card to spike into this level of being a problem? And I kind of wonder, like, could there have been a different assassin design that ended up making Outlook okay? Because at some point it felt like it was okay to print. And I think that what it comes down to is really the reliance on Shadow Strike.
Yeah.
I think that if imagine a world where the Tristan was designed with a less explosive kill and through some way just kind of ground out the game through some advantage later on. Outlook needing to be used multiple turns in a row just to protect some not game-ending amount of damage or something would feel like a much worse value proposition, I think, in general. I think you kind of highlighted at one point that Outlook does provide some sort of proactive advantage as well, in that it does just give you that counter. And in particular, in the Tristan design, that counter can be the thing that allows you to level to 2 and get your 2 cards early on, which is, super important just for economy. It can be bounced around a little bit if you need to do reclaimy shenanigans or something. That's stuff you can do too. And you keep getting you get the prep counter back every time, which sets up your Mastermind Scheme, which sets up your Shadow Strike. But so it's got a little bit of that where, like, I feel like it's the card itself is a bit of a perfect storm where it does a little of everything. It can be proactive in that deck in particular, whereas previously Xander decks were like, prep counters, whatever. It's not like nobody's playing coup de grace or anything. It just was never quite a good finisher. But they didn't care that much, and it was protecting a coup de grace or something, which like nobody played, nobody cared. The Luxem decks didn't play wind because you wanted fire instead. That's way better just for doing anything, getting any momentum in the game. Though you guys did play against like a wind Luxem at trios, right? The
there was a wind Luxem that we played in trios. Yeah,
that was a fascinating little list.
That was, actually there's been like wind Luxem has seen a very small amount of play throughout the Mercurial Heart season as well.
Yeah.
Because of the Tristan support adding some extra kind of different game plans for that deck instead of just trying to rush to 3 through like creative shocks and stuff. So
But I think that's actually a great point in favor of exactly what I'm saying, which is that like I don't think Outlook is unbalanced necessarily in that deck.
Yeah.
But the fact that it entirely shuts down, or it, as you said, forces the opponent to play really suboptimally around a game-ending turn. That and if they don't have it, then they just go, here's it stops everything, including the card that it really should have no right to be able to stop, which is Vanish from Sight.
Yeah.
So Vanish from Sight, I'm just going to point this out because this is really, it's not going to matter anymore because you guys can't play Outlook anymore. But I think it's really interesting. It's one of these little quirks of Grand Archive rules that I get really into. I love them. I think it's so cool. Vanish from Sight is a 3-cost fast speed event that you can only play during the Recollection step that gives you stealth for the turn. Recollection phase. Steps a podcast. So normally no player has priority to activate things in the core rules of the game, the core turn structure, until the Recollection phase. No opportunity exists for a player to activate a card or ability until the Recollection phase begins. But if that was the case, if that was how this worked, then you would go activate Korhazi Outlook during Recollection phase, which you still could have done. And I think there's definitely a few people who've gotten got by this. You activate it during Recollection phase, the opponent goes, in response, Vanish from Sight. And you go, shoot, it didn't work. That sucked, right? But if you materialize something during your materialization phase, that creates opportunity for both players before the materialization resolves. So the play was to materialize something and hold opportunity and go, in response to my materialization, I'm going to activate my Korhazi Outlook. Now the opponent can't Vanish from Sight because it isn't the Recollection phase yet. We're still in materialize. And then they go, well, yeah, I lost all my possible ways of interacting with this. And yeah, that's a powerful interaction. It was just kind of a cute thing to mention.
Yeah. No, it's like it's the timing issues that come up with it make it like a lot more powerful than it could be, or should be. The repeatability aspect of it is just like insane. I compare it a lot to like silence effects from Magic the Gathering, if you're familiar with those, where most of the time they're almost always just on a like what would be an action card in Grand Archive, where it's just a one-time use thing.
Yeah.
You use it, goes away. If you can stop it, then your opponent is down like a lot more resources. Whereas like with Outlook, if they can get through the turn you activate Outlook, they still have the Outlook and they can do it again next turn. So like you still have to like try and find an answer for it permanently too. And so it just generates, I think, a lot more advantage, some in very obvious ways, some in more subtle ways that I think everybody will be a little bit more excited that this card is banned and won't be seeing play anymore. So
what happens, Taylor, to the metagame now with this new ban list? What's going on?
So we have kind of some winners here and some losers. Losers obviously are Tristan. I think like Outlook was doing a lot of work in a lot of these grindy matchups to kind of really put the game away. You'll get to the point in these matchups where as Tristan, you have just like a million cards in hand and it's trivial to go Outlook, Mastermind Scheme, Shadow Strike, and just like win out of nowhere. Like you can win with like, 6 or 7 prep counters or whatever, starting that turn, or maybe even less. Right. I haven't done the math because I haven't played Tristan in quite a while, but anyway, so like and getting that many cards is just not difficult to do in Tristan either, because Tristan just draws a ton of cards. So like it really kind of like hurts Tristan in those grindy matchups. Things like Merlin, where Merlin's going to have some late game answers to kind of get in your way and make you do some stuff. Nico, obviously, like that one really hurts because like Nico, I think, was already like a bad matchup, and now it's just even worse. Like it's very easy for them to just like Song of Frost your Shadow Strikes now. And like Slimes, like I think is another one where Tristan just loses points across the board, I think. So obviously Tristan's not going to be having a very good time here. Because of that as well, I think Nico is also going to see like a little bit of less play, or just have smaller metagame share. To me, a lot of people are really, really hyped on Nico for a good reason. Nico, I think, is a very powerful deck. I think it's got a lot of things going for it. I think it also has some like pretty specific weaknesses that you can kind of exploit. But one of its biggest selling points in my mind was that it had a really good Tristan matchup. And so since there's going to be less Tristans running around, I think Nico is just, there's less reason to play Nico. She just like, she has good matchups still, but it's just without getting like your slam dunk matchup regularly anymore, I think you're not going to have a really good time.
Just really briefly for the audience, what do you think was the advantage that Nico had over Tristan? I think we've talked about a little bit, but I just want to refresh.
Yeah, so Nico just has like a ton of huge attacks, and like she can grind down Tristan really well. So like she just generates so much, like the way Tristan generates value, like Nico does it almost even better. So Tristan's just drawing a bunch of cards for Windmill Engineers and reclaiming them and like bouncing her Sadie's back to hand and like doing her Tristan level abilities. Those all just draw Nico or Tristan a bunch of cards. But Nico's going to mill herself a ton, put a bunch of floating memory in her graveyard, and use that to get really powerful regalia out of her material deck. So she can also Lost in Thought for a bunch of cards as well then and just refill her hand that way. So Lost in Thought is going to let you like exile a bunch of or banish a bunch of floating memory from your graveyard to draw a bunch of cards. So she also just will have a full grip most of the time. Tristan does not run a lot of answers to material deck cards to regalia. So oftentimes Nico's just going to be sitting out with like a ton of really cool stuff out. She gets Vapor Jet shields to take a damage off of every single source of damage to her. So now all of a sudden your Ominous Shadow tokens are not like dealing any follow-up damage to your Shadow Strikes. So you need to get even more prep counters.
I think the Taunters, I don't know if you're going to get to that here.
Ooh. The Taunters, I mean, so Shadow Strike gets around Taunt.
Right.
But they're still useful. Because like all of Tristan's support stuff like just is not going to be chipping in for damage throughout the game as well, giving you a lower Shadow Strike threshold. So now Tristan needs even more prep counters on top of what she would normally need, which means she's going to need to like see like a couple more Mastermind schemes. And Mastermind scheme, like even though it only costs 3, it's still like pretty susceptible to Frostbind and Cerulean Decree. So Nico's able to like, stop some of those and continue to delay the game. Meanwhile, Nico has a ton of huge attacks as well. So Icebound Slam is always hitting for 8 in that deck. I haven't seen a Nico deck in forever that runs any norm cards. So Icebound Slam is always hitting for 8. Ravishing Finale is just threatening to end the game at any random point in time in the late game. And then she's also running Tideholder Claymore, which lets her hit for a bunch just on its own. That swings for 5. And then of course Magebane Lash is another huge regalia that swings for a ton in the late game and even like a fair amount in the mid game. So like Nico is just putting on a decent amount of pressure to Tristan as well, besides continuing to like keep up with the card economy. So it just like it kind of feels like Nico's always ahead in that matchup.
Yeah, just it has always felt like she's just kind of got the answers. Mm-hmm. And if she gets any significant milling done at all, then Tristan is on an actual clock to finish the game. And I think Tristan can win, but it just requires like the, that fast, perfect string basically of hitting the scheme into with the slice and dice variants, a little bit of early slice and dice can potentially get there. But the thing of it, Nico, is she runs Serene Spirit too. So she's got extra healing built in and.
Yep. So she's got like 31 health essentially, which means also like Shadow or Slice and Dice is not happening. Like it's just not going to kill her.
Yeah.
Because like you're fine to like for the most part, it's even if you get stuck at Tony, you're almost never going to get stuck at Tony. But if you might get stuck at Tony, you can still potentially, as long as you have cards in memory or enough fractals out that will mill you some floating memory or something. Just any resources anywhere. You can totally pop your spirit as Tony and then level up to Nico.
Yeah.
So like you're just not even constrained by that. You have 31 health so early in the game. So it's really hard for Tristan to actually rush her down. and which of course means too, like, again, like you just need even more prep counters for your Shadow Strikes, because you can't, like, it's tough to grind Nico down to the point where you can, like, hit her with a smaller Shadow Strike anyway. And Tristan also really just doesn't have any fast speed damage to, like, kill Nico in response to popping the Spirit and gaining the health either. So, actually, hold up. Let me back up 1 second, because the Serene Spirit actually does not help against Shadow Strike, because you're going to take the 25 damage and you don't have, you can't recover past 0. So
no, but it helps you. It helps you. They can't lower the threshold as easily against you. I think that's where it's helpful, is that they're going to be trying to chip some damage off at some point, and it means their Shadow Strike has to just be 100% lethal when they go for it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Like we talked about the Taunters helping avoid a lot of chip damage early. If they do manage to get some chip damage in, that goes away before Shadow Strike happens. So, yeah. But because there's going to be less Tristan, Nico probably will. I shouldn't say there's going to be. There will probably be less Tristan. Like, I would be a lot less excited about playing Tristan in this metagame. And because of that, because Nico's natural prey is going away, Nico will probably see some smaller metagame share as well.
Yeah, I don't think this kills Tristan by any means. I think there's adaptations that are going to take place a little bit, and that deck is still packed with good cards. It wasn't the issue. I'm curious to see if that it's a small change, and I don't know if this should happen, but I'm curious to see if it switches people to trying more automaton based strategies again a little bit, using like Sirocco and stuff to try and get a little bit of value that way, just because they don't need another human slot. But I doubt it. I think they'll probably just pull out the outlooks and put in some more good Umbra cards or something, and just try and have more, maybe more routes to victory at the end, instead of just kind of relying on the one hitting for sure.
Yeah. Well, we might even see more aggressive builds as well that lean into Slice and Dice even more. Yeah. Or even some more like Umbral cards instead. Like we've seen some builds running around with Penumbral Waltz and I thought there was another attack card or something that was being used as well. Like Inspiring Call, to buff up your shadow tokens, and kind of swarm the board a little bit more, instead of trying to get one large Shadow Strike. Instead, you get a bunch of small attacks that will kill you in one turn anyway. So there's plenty of adjustments to be made. I do think that Nico is still going to play well into all of those adjustments. So, like, if Tristan really doesn't see like a drop in play, Nico, I think, will still be very fine to play as well. Because Nico still has like good matchups and into a lot of decks in the metagame. Like she eats up allies insanely. Aggro decks really struggle into her as well. So, like, she still has a lot of really good matchups in the metagame.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's see. So, I mean, as far as that goes, I don't know if there's like really any other like losers. Like, I don't think there was anything really that had like an insane Tristan matchup before that is now going to have less fun because of this. Like, to me, I think it's just kind of those two. So, kind of looking at like winners, to me, like a big one is Merlin. Merlin is like number one in my mind, actually, because Tristan was able to just get around a lot of Merlin's defenses, because a lot of it just relied around like Incarnate Majesty and stuff anyway, and putting a giant spirit on the board that halved damage and was an interceptor. And like Tristan has like a million ways to stop that. Like, that card's expensive anyway. Like, it costs, Incarnate Majesty costs 12 minus levels and weapons. So like, it's just an excellent incapacitate target. Oftentimes, like, it still takes a few turns after you get like potentially 2 to 3 turns after you hit level 3 with Merlin to actually be able to play it anyway. So you just don't always have the time. So she might kill you before that, and then even like Shadow Strike itself, like if she gets a couple mastermind preparations or mastermind schemes down, it's not unreasonable for her to have like 50 plus prep counters in those matchups and just hit you with a Shadow Strike for 50 plus, that even if it's halved by Majestic Spirit, like, it's still going to kill you. So not having to worry about like trying to figure out how you're getting around Korhazi Outlook is like a pretty big deal for Merlin now. You can play things like Under Fire a little bit more confidently. Like that can still get incapacitated, but like Merlin also runs incapacitates in the board usually. So I expect like Merlin is pretty happy about this. Has a little bit more ways to fight back against the Shadow Strike, and then of course like as soon as Tristan goes for Shadow Strike now, like she's kind of done. Like it's hard to build back because you have to pay all your prep counters as part of the cost of playing Shadow Strike. So like Tristan really has to take the time and make sure like she's going to get the kill when she goes for it. So all of that I think is pretty exciting for Merlin.
Yeah, I think this season in general, just seeing the rise of Under Fire, from the start, it was like not really a card that was getting a lot of play, but it's starting to really show up. Under Fire is a 3-cost action, Ranger skill reaction, fast speed, class bonus. So for Rangers, it actually only costs 2, but Ranger is not super played right now. It's getting played, just stuff like Merlin. Your champion becomes distant. Then you may have Under Fire deal 4 damage to your champion. If you do, your champion gains stealth until end of the turn. So that card has been kind of cool to see. Like I think pretty much every card that gives your champion stealth is getting played right now is just an out to mostly Tristan, but also the aggro decks, also to a much smaller degree Slimes, just because Slimes has Ethereal Slime who has True Sight, and we'll just put that down and go, okay, well, you're still taking 5.
Yep. But yeah, so all those really kind of line up with Merlin being in a good spot. I think too, we're seeing some changes in Merlin, how Merlin's being played as well. So the first instance I saw this was Ver's list from Yeti Webcam Weekly a couple weeks ago, where they just cut the Lorraine level 2 and 3 from the list entirely and just played Merlin, Merlin 3 and Merlin 2 as your level 2 and level 3 options, which I think is really smart. I was considering that before Chicago, and just was too much of a coward to actually like pull the trigger on it. So it's exciting to see some people that are braver than I and more courageous than I take these plunges. But like a lot of the times, those extra levels aren't needed, so it's going to buy you some extra material deck slots that are useful. Things like Tariff Ring then are pretty dope into Tristan. Whereas like previously you didn't always have the space for it. Some of them too are like kind of getting rid of the ally package a little bit. There was like a lot of Hasty Messenger, Flame Rune Swordsman, some honorable vanguards, cremation rituals that were being played to kind of generate advantage that way. We're seeing more kind of like action based packages now in some of these lists. So I don't know if that's necessarily better or worse against Tristan, but
that's really fun to see for me, just off the back of Worlds, where Worlds was one. I mean, it's maybe a little reductive to say this, but it's not unfair to say that Worlds was won off the back of Hasty Messenger and Flame Rune Swordsman. I mean, they attacked, and won the game. And I would not expect this version, this kind of update, this event, or excuse me, action heavy version of Merlin would actually do as well in that Rye focused metagame of Worlds.
Yeah, I mean, it just when you don't have to race as much, like it's so much nicer to just not have to like play these cards. Because like honestly, Flame Rune Swordsman is not a good card in Merlin. Honorable Vanguard, not like it's really not where you want to be either. Like these cards just don't do anything for you late game when you draw them. Like it just feels horrible, right? So moving away to those, to cards that are actually going to be like useful for you, like be it removal spells like Focus Flames. Ver's list was playing Retold Fortune, which is something I've been playing in my Water Merlin list. So it's exciting to see here. I haven't liked it as much when I tried it in Fire Merlin, but I also just didn't go this action heavy either. So Retold Fortune, which lets you discard a spell card to draw a card, and then it also has floating memory at level 2+. Like is a lot more exciting.
Well, and then what Ver did was replace the off element cards for the prismatic shenanigans, kept those in, but replaced them with specifically spells. So that he could pitch them Retold Fortune.
Yes.
As well as Creative Shock. So the Retold Fortune is really the Hasty Messenger in this list, right? It's taking the place of Hasty Messenger. Hasty Messenger, except in weird circumstances where your opponent's playing Rye and doesn't do anything, usually gets exactly pitching one card. That's what it does, to draw a card. So the Retold Fortune kind of does a better job of that by pitching a spell to draw two. And now that kind of affords you this space to go, okay, well, if we're not doing the ally stuff, we don't need to do Cremation Ritual. We can just put in a bunch more interaction and make sure, we've got enough. This list is running 4 Fireball, 3 Sudden Steel, 2 Tether, the 4 Ascension package, the full ghosts, full 4 ghosts at the end game. It's 3 Crux sites too. It's just kind of got enough room to have like everything in there now. And Retold Fortune pitches the off element stuff. It pitches some of the Crux cards early on, so you can just grab them with Crux Sight again later. It's not a big deal. Like you can pitch Majesty. That's fine. That's not a bad thing to do early game at all, to just find some action. And then later on, you'll find the Crux Sight and then you'll get it back. So I kind of, I do think I agree. I think this is a creative and pretty solid route to take this and just go, yeah, we don't need Lorraine anymore. We are just doing full mage shenanigans.
And yeah, we're seeing more of these Merlin lists too pick up on the fragmented spirit instead of just the normal spirit, which is just excellent call. It's so easy to get to level 3 in Merlin because of her level 2 or second level ability, letting you get level counters. You hit that early so often that you redraw that card so fast. It's just not an issue, and it makes your opening hand so much smoother. And honestly, I really enjoy that. Like, I think it works a lot better just with straight Merlin than with Lorraine as well. I mean, it didn't not work with Lorraine, but you'd get hands where, if you had one more card, you could like level to Lorraine and Flame Sweep, and clear the board with the cleave attack. Where there's just not an issue in this deck, right? But of course, then the other issue is like, right, well, even if you were playing the other spirit, would you have been able to draw the Flame Sweep and the resources to get to level 2 effectively? So it kind of balances it out, which is why I say you're not really giving that up by playing fragmented. But realizing now too that like just Lorraines just aren't really necessary in this metagame, and the Flame Sweep cleave is not as necessary. Is I think a pretty smart call moving forward. So. But yeah, so I think Merlin is going to see quite a bit of like an easier Tristan matchup. So they should have a much better time in this metagame. I think ally lists have not been seeing quite as much play either, which actually I think Fire Merlin is like supposed to eat ally lists, but I'm not sure. I go back and forth on whether that's true or not. Like sometimes it feels really good. Other times like they make these ally lists make adjustments such that Merlin is not able to fight effectively. So like having like real removal, like focus flames and stuff feels pretty dope into those matchups. So I think Merlin's really cool moving forward. Water decks also are going to be a huge beneficiary. So even though Nico, I think, takes a little bit of a loss, I think water decks in general are pretty excited to see Outlook go. Because like the best card that water decks have into Tristan is Song of Frost, which is a 2-cost action, fast speed that just ends combat if target unit is attacking. And so it's a pretty hard counter to Shadow Strike. And again, it's timed really well as well, because Tristan's already had to pay all these prep counters to attack, and you throw it on the Song of Frost, and now all of a sudden she's lost her Shadow Strike, she's lost her prep counters, and she's going to have a really bad time. With Outlook, you never had the opportunity to play Song of Frost because that ability to stop you from doing that. Now all you have to really worry about is Incapacitate, and again, like still costs like a lot of resources and a lot of reserve from hand, so they're getting to a low hand size, so you can frostbind them effectively as well. So water decks in general just are going to have a lot better time against Tristan, and so I think we might see them pop up a little bit more, even though like Nico kind of eats Tristan, so like she's might see some less play. Like Tristan is not going away, and just not having to like worry about Outlook anymore is just gonna be really good for water decks. So
I think there's a potential the water deck that we see the most jump in play. Well, I think actually if I'm gonna define it that way, it's almost 100% the case. the water deck that we're going to see the highest jump in play from before to after this ban list is Water Arasana. But that's maybe jumping the gun a little bit.
Yeah, cute listeners will note we left a little something off of our ban list announcement earlier. Don't worry, we're getting to it.
Yeah, very soon.
But yeah, so water decks are sweet. Slimes, obviously, I think is still insane. Slimes is, I think, far and away the best deck in the format at the moment.
Easily.
Which is kind of like surprising that Outlook was banned and nothing in Slimes was banned. I mean, Gaia's Blessing was moved to category 1, and like we did have the Stone Scale Errata, to be fair, right after Ascent Chicago. But like Slimes really hasn't gone anywhere. Like if you look at regional metagames and like high level tournament metagames since then, Slimes is still just like really taking over the format by quite a big margin. So
let me say something about this. I, as a resident slime lover, I think it's wild. It's wild that Slimes didn't get hit at all. Yeah. And the Stone Scale Errata did stop. I mean, it did make it a little clunkier. It did stop some of the things it can do, but the most offensive thing that Stone Scale Ban does is extend your turn by being played off of Quicksilver Grail in order to then use when Stone Scale Ban comes into play, you can discard up to 3 allies from your hand or memory, then draw 3 cards. So you would put cards down, then pop the Quicksilver, put the ban into play, then the cards you put down to play, whatever slimes stuff before you get rid of, then draw cards. You've extended your turn. Now you can do more stuff. And the cost on there doesn't stop that play. All that does is require that you either have a floating memory, which is not terribly difficult to do in that deck, or just put down one more card. And you banish one at random, granted. So, you want it to be a 4th ally or something. But then you still put the thing into play and get rid of the 3 cards and draw cards. It only is like a slight stumble on a card that is still so good that you jam it in as the 5th card in your list when you're building it. It's Spirit of Slime and then 3 Sylvie levels and then Stone Scale Ban.
Yeah.
So it's wild to me because the first thought I had was like, well, give time for Stone Scale Ban to see how it affects everything. I think it's pretty clear. Like that was probably a needed change to Stone Scale Ban because it felt like too much of everything before. But Slimes could have used a hit of some kind. I don't know what the hit is, but they could have used something.
Yeah, honestly, Storm Slime, I think is like, in my opinion, the hit that kind of kills the deck, I think too. But also, Storm Slime is just like the biggest offender. It's a fireball that also digs you 2, that also attacks for 3. So
or 5.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's just it's kind of insane.
The thing too about it, and I've said this before, but I just want to reiterate it here because we're talking about it now. It's fireball scales off of your level, which in late game Merlin is not something that can be interacted with as easily, but there is interaction for it. Still, there are things that will de-level your opponent. There's some weird elixirs and stuff nobody's playing, but those exist, right? There's interaction. There is 0 interaction for what Storm Slime, what Storm Slime scales off of, which is number of banished slimes. You can't do anything about that.
Yep.
I say that though, because my only thought when I'm trying to figure out, we know that the people at Weebs they're good. They're smart. They know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than, I don't want to take this and be like, they screwed up, they should have banned Storm Slime. I'm trying to think, what were they thinking with this change? And I am just curious to see what Mortal Ambition has in it. Right.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Like there might be some cards in Mortal Ambition that really just kind of upend everything. Right. And I think actually, if you're trying to nerf slimes too, I think Gaia's Blessing is the correct card to to start banning.
Yes.
So like I'm excited to see that at category 1. I would have loved to have seen that just go straight to category 2 or even just be banned. Because like that's really what puts your Storm Slimes into overdrive in the late game for Sylvie is like, which of course is Gaia's Blessing is also enabled by Stone Scale Band. So Gaia's Blessing, costs 1 memory cost to play from your material deck. But you can also, as an alternate cost, banish 4 animals and or beasts from your graveyard to activate it. So like
not just an alternate cost though. I want to clarify the activate thing. That's why it's so good, is because it's to activate it, which means I still get that rules question all the time. It means to play it during your main phase, which is the normal timing for playing what item card or whatever it is. And not during a materialized phase. So you can actually use your Stone Scale Band, discard the cards, extend your turn, and then go, by the way, I'm now going to activate Gaia's Blessing out of my material, like banish 4 animals. Look, how'd they get there from my discard pile? Hey, look, they're all slimes. Hey, look, my Storm Slime now does +4 more damage, and I just drew the cards to play it. And it's like, that's so to me, hitting Gaia's Blessing would be reminiscent of back in the first season of play when they hit Reckless Conversion and when they hit Sword of Avarice in a way. Like Conversion, I think, is the closest one though, because Conversion was the card that, if we said back on the podcast then, it made Rai 1 turn too fast, right? It was the card where you had a decent game against Rai, except he was always a turn ahead of you because he just went off on a Reckless Conversion turn. Gaia's Blessing, same thing. Nobody's playing Gaia's Blessing to get to play more slimes off the top of their deck. And I say that as someone who's played every slime build and have tried to do that a lot. That's not what it does. It's something that occasionally, incidentally ends up mattering slightly. But it banishes 4 slimes for free on your turn. And that just puts all your damage into range to take the opponent out.
Yeah. Your Storm Slimes go from like hitting from like 3 to 5 to 7 to 9 all of a sudden. And like if you hit a back-to-back Storm Slime after that, like it's just game over, right?
It's just,
and again,
like
same thing can be said about Fireball. Obviously, like Merlin has had tons of opportunities to not draw into multiple fireballs in the late game. But I mean, again, like these slimes are also swinging for 3. They're also threatening to replace, or draw into more storm slimes, I should say. They don't necessarily replace themselves, but they just cycle through your deck faster to find the other copies of storm slime. So like, it's just kind of an overwhelming card. So yeah, I would have really liked to seen Gaia's Blessing as kind of like the storm slime enabler, be removed from the format. But honestly, I mean, the format is still in kind of a really good position as well. Like I think slimes are very clearly like the dominant deck at the moment, but the format's still pretty diverse. Like we're seeing, we're still seeing Merlins, we're still seeing Nikos, we're still seeing Tristans, we're still seeing allies. We've seen Luxem decks pop up recently. There's been kind of some innovation. A Fire Tenoris deck won the Singapore regional. So like we're still seeing innovation in the format as well. So I don't think like not banning anything from slimes was incorrect, or kind of like a sign of like giving up or anything like that. The format's still fine, and we're also a month away from a new set, so anything can really happen at this point. I do appreciate this conservative approach from Weebs, kind of like taking the time to see what happens, especially because I think Outlook is actually like maybe a better card to ban for ease of design over like the course of many months, many sets, right? Like it just makes their job easier. So I'm okay with removing this from the format, seeing what happens, and then if something else needs to be removed, like go from there.
Yeah, and I, as a slime fan, am heartened by this approach as well, because I don't want, just like not from a game health standpoint, at the present, it would probably be the biggest thing to upend the metagame to ban a storm slime, but I don't like want that to happen, because that is the most fun card in that deck.
Oh yeah, easy.
It's so powerful. That's what makes it fun, but and it does everything, which is what makes it fun. But I mean, that's fun. It is really fun to play. It's really fun to build into and play around and build around. And I don't think I want necessarily, like, my ideal scenario in my head for how this would be approached would involve keeping Storm Slime a playable card, because you want that to be fun. You just want it to be, you want other options to be competitive with it. And I think you have a really great point. And I see this a lot, when I'm hanging out in social media spaces, Discords, lurking sometimes more than being able to talk a lot, but on Twitter and everything too. I do see a lot of people with complaints about the Summer of Slimes, Summer of Recollection Recollection decks. I mean, I understand that people definitely are playing in metagames where they're seeing the same decks over and over again. And I do completely empathize with the fact that can be really annoying and frustrating. Like, look, guys, I don't like playing as Tristan either. Okay. Like, I don't know if anyone actually likes playing against Tristan. Or even playing Tristan. I'm not convinced that anyone's that masochistic that they actually like playing. No, it's for certain people, not me. But this, Taylor is right when we look at the metagame and we see those two decks are certainly, in the top class of decks, but far from the only decks performing. We're actually still seeing diverse top eights in a lot of these events. They do edge towards Slime sometimes. And we're not denying that either. Slime's the most powerful deck. We said it, right?
But it's the best deck. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the best deck in the format. I've said it for a long time, and I'm still saying it.
I mean, that's another point too. Just a quick interrupt is just because it's the best deck does not mean it needs to go away. Like most formats will have a best deck.
Every format. I'm straight up. You cannot design a card game with a format that does not have a best deck.
Yep.
It's not reasonable to think there's a perfect rock, paper, scissors, or if a format is so diverse that there's like 8 different decks in top 8, one of those still has a higher win rate than the other ones. Yep. Like slightly,
Yeah. The issue just arises when the best deck is so much better than everything else that it makes no sense to play anything else.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we're there yet. I think we're closer to that than is maybe enjoyable or we would want to be. But I don't think we're necessarily there yet either. Like we had another large tournament in Taiwan that was 118 people. The top 8 was a Sylvie Allen deck, actually, not even like Slimes.
0 Storm Slimes in that list.
Yep. A couple of Slime lists, but then we also had a Luxem Xander, a Fire Acre Lorraine, Rye was there, a Crux Lorraine, Wind, and then another Luxem deck. So like that's a perfectly nice top 8 to have. Like that is a really good looking top 8. So like we're not sitting here trying to say the format is bad or anything like that.
Yeah.
Not at all.
I'm just specifically trying to push back against that a little bit because I just hear it repeated like slightly too often, and I'm not trying to deny anyone's personal experience playing the game. But I do think, again, it's just like it's a wider lens look at everything is usually, in my opinion, the most sort of honest way to look at everything. And it just I am looking forward to what interaction comes out to put Slimes a little bit, less at the top. And I'm looking forward to what other decks come out that are going to challenge it and challenge the other decks in the metagame. But the fact that looking at our wider metagame, we've got Lorraine, Tenoris, Rye, Sylvie, Xander, Tristan, Nico. Like, there are so many playable champions. All 3 elements are getting played. But what really are you looking for in a metagame if you complain, if you're pushing complaints about this being an awful metagame? I don't know what you're looking for. You're looking for literally like a needle in a haystack. Like, I don't know. Perfect. They'll go in and out.
I mean, the problem, like not everybody's going to bring a different deck. Like that's just not going to happen. So for what we have, this is just a really good metagame. I think just in general, like there may be some play patterns we don't like or whatever, but it's very diverse. There's lots of different decks and champions and elements running around. So, we are starting to get a little long here, so I'm gonna move us along here and kind of
I was going to move us in and say, well, you know what deck we're not seeing a lot of right now?
Oh wow, look at you, ready to go. Yes, yeah. You know what deck we're not seeing in any element is any sort of cleric deck, and this might finally change with the banned and restricted announcement. We also had the announcement of a new Proxia's Vault card, which is a material deck card that you can print and play and use in legal sanctioned tournaments in Grand Archive. If you're going to Ascent Singapore, you can show up with a printed copy of this card in your material deck on top of a normal Grand Archive card, sleeved up, and it is perfectly legal. So it's very cool. We get some actual real print and plays. But this card is going to hopefully put Arasana on the map and give her a little bit of a time to shine. So this card is Polaris Twinkling Cauldron, which is a regalia item, cleric artifact, norm, 0 cost, and it has Arasana bonus. You may activate this card from your material deck. If you do, Polaris enters the field rested. Whenever you sacrifice an herb, put an age counter on Polaris. And class bonus, rest, banish Polaris, deal X damage to all allies, then generate up to X cosmic bolt cards and shuffle them into your deck. X is the amount of age counters that were on Polaris. So there's a ton of stuff going on here. The first thing that pops out to me is like the flexibility of this card being able to either materialize for 0 or activate during your main phase for 0. If you're Arasana. So just like kind of being able to play around with that is really nice. Lets you like cheat materializations. We all know how powerful getting extra materializations is, and this lets you do that. It gives Arasana kind of like a board clear here. You level up to 1 or 2, play some gather herbs, maybe generate a bunch of herbs. You play a Polaris, and you sacrifice all those herbs. All of a sudden, put a bunch of age counters on this thing and pop it. Deal 5, 6, however many herbs you have damage to all the allies. Clear your opponent's board, and then give yourself a win condition because you are going to generate a ton of Cosmic Bolt cards and put them into your deck.
I would love a minute on the platform here to talk about this.
I mean, this is all you. I'm not an Arasana hater, but I'm certainly not an Arasana enjoyer, so go for it.
Taylor, who is the person in our local metagame who has played Arasana the most?
Oh, that would be you.
Yeah, it certainly is true. I've tried so hard to make Arasana work prior to this. And so I do feel reasonably capable of providing a good assessment for whether or not this card has the possibility to make Arasana viable. Arasana suffered from a few particular problems in the past in the builds I've played. And those problems were typically Arasana was too weak to aggressive strategies with allies because she didn't really activate board clears until late in the game that were reasonable to play in any capacity. She was typically a turn behind the opponent in her ability to kind of close the game out. That's where she lost to decks like Rye a little more often than I would be nice. I've been quoted as saying she's bad Rye, which felt true in certain builds. And she didn't have the amount of damage to the opponent's face if you're trying to do Astral Zenith shenanigans and not. I've done ally builds too that are a little different, but if you're trying to do Astral Zenith Cosmic Bolt shenanigans, she had a limited amount of damage in her deck, and the opponent playing enough ways to prevent that damage just meant Taylor, I think it was against you. I had a game where I had you at 27 out of 28 health.
Yep.
You were playing Merlin for I don't know how many turns. 5, maybe?
A very long time.
6 turns? I don't know. It was a long time. And I kept putting down allies to try and close the game, and you would just have the exact answer, whatever. And I ran out of Cosmic Bolts, so I couldn't do it.
Yep.
So
it was great.
Yeah. So here's a card that enters play without taking up a materialize phase. Okay, so you don't have to spend an extra turn doing it. Okay, it grows in power based on creating herbs, which I didn't mention that, but her herb creation was, if it didn't draw cards, it didn't do a lot. Okay, but this grows in power based on how many herbs you have in use, and then it wipes the board when you need it to without being tied to being Astro Element, and it generates as many extra damage sources as you need. I almost couldn't believe when I read this card, the line of generating X cosmic bolts and shuffling them to your deck. This is Magic Arena level nonsense, and I'm so for it. I'm so here for it, because Wizards of the Coast are cowards for not actually making those effects in Magic, because here you go. Look, it's doable. You can just do it. You don't have to say, oh, we couldn't do this in paper. Yeah, you can. There it is.
It's happening. It's
just
easy.
Do it.
Yep.
Don't be a coward.
Just all packs of sleeves come in 100, but the deck size is 60. So like, what are we doing here, guys?
So basically this card does tick off pretty much every box on the list. The one that I don't feel is 100% ticked off is speed. Okay. Mm-hmm. I do feel like it's essential as a material deck card that this had to say on it that you could activate it without materializing it. Yeah. Otherwise, it was just going to play into Arasana's problem. But that doesn't put Arasana a turn ahead. It just makes her answer to things not put her a turn further behind.
Yep.
So my take on this card is I do not have time before Singapore to test if this is viable. I envy the people who do. And if I go to Singapore and I get blown out by Arasanas, that'll be the best possible outcome I can imagine. As far as losing the event is concerned. I knew you were gonna get me. You're my coach for this one, but I'm not saying that. But if I have to lose the event in some way, if it's to Arasana decks, I will take it. Okay, that's fine. But I don't have the time to test that and figure it out. My speculation is that the deck will have, with this card, all of its problems largely resolved, at least in a good chunk of games that you play. There is play around it. Like, you have to not get this thing blown up before you can activate it and wipe the board. And that can be a little tricky, especially if you try to use the activate from material deck instead and it comes in rested, then the opponent has a turn to answer it. But when this generates 5 cosmic bolts, which is like probably the minimum your minimum is 4 if you're going to do this in a reasonable fashion. But I imagine you're going to try to sneak. There's a couple different gathering options that are all right. There's some that I still don't think are very good, but there's a couple that are all right, and you probably can hit one of them in a typical game and kind of make this go off. When you put 5 more bolts in your deck, those bolts, it's not just that you have more bolts, right? It's that the bolts get stronger and stronger.
Mm-hmm. Well, and not only that, if you found any star calling cards, or including bolts, and you were glimpsing, you found multiple in a glimpse.
Thank you. Yes, I was going to mention this.
They are going to get shuffled back in when you activate this as well, which is huge.
That was another weakness.
Card on the bottom. You glimpse a card to the bottom of your deck. It's essentially gone for the game because there's not a lot of shuffle effects in Grand Archive.
There is
shuffling those cards in is huge.
We have Reverse Disguise now, right? So there's actually a little interesting tension behind this now, because like you can save if you're gonna scry early sometimes, and you're gonna scry a bolt to the bottom. Mm-hmm. And you are going to play probably a couple copies of Reverse Disguise or something. And if you find Reverse Disguise, you can play the bolt. Potentially. It still goes to the top 4, then you glimpse 2. But if you don't play Reverse Disguise, now you have an option, which you didn't have in ALC meta at all. But this is now another option on top to shuffle your deck as well. But I should have mentioned that, because that's another part of this whole package that makes this card really sweet.
Yeah, there's a lot of little knobs here. This kind of I'm going to say something that sounds incredibly ridiculous, but this is a little bit like Storm Slime in that it does everything.
It does do everything.
This is obviously not Storm Slime. This is not even doing any damage. It is doing damage.
It's the autumn of Arasana, or for the people in Australia, it's the spring of Arasana.
Yep.
And it's been the winter of, I guess it's been the winter of slimes.
It's Arasana Equinox, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. That way it doesn't matter which season it is.
Arsenal Equinox.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, no, I think this is a sweet card. I think this gives Arasana a really huge tool that she needs. I really like the flexibility of being able to activate it during your main phase or materialize it during your materialize phase. Just like if you need to like clear the board now, it lets you do that, which is really great. Otherwise, if you can wait a turn or whatever, you can activate it, and it's still relatively safe. It's got a lot going for it. So I think you go for it.
I think overall this will take Arasana to being playable. I think Arasana is legit with this card. Arasana is now a playable deck.
Oh yeah,
you can play this deck, and you will actually win games, which I've done a couple times, but I'm going to be honest, not as often as I would have liked, right? But I think you can actually win games. I think you can win locals with Arasana with this card. I think with even if it takes an adaptation, but maybe right now, just given how Slimes works and stuff, I think there are decks that are still going to be too fast for Arasana, and it'll be more like you really need everything to go right to get, you put the bolts in and you immediately flip one on that turn and then one on the next turn. And maybe you had one in hand that you played as well. And that just like, boom, you got there. It might be a situation like that where like things need to go right in order to take wins. Cause otherwise Slimes is probably going to burst you out. If Rye's being played, Rye's going to burst you out. The deck was also absolutely stone cold dead to Luxem before. It was not funny. The deck literally had no chance of winning. It was a 0 to 100. I think match against Luxem, but now because they grow, right? Like you actually can get to the point where if you put enough cosmic bolts in and see them, the cosmic bolt one cosmic bolt can do a life total of damage, right? So like, I don't think it's favored because I think Lightweavers goes faster, but I think it's not a 0 to 100 anymore against Luxem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I agree. This is super exciting. Do you have any final thoughts on Polaris as the Arasana expert?
I definitely like test it. Try Arasana, try all the builds. That's the big thing I want to say. We had heard from people inside Weebs that they felt Arasana was playable prior to this. I have vehemently disagreed many times. I don't know, many times. I mean, like this goes back way back. Taylor, this goes way back.
This is
but I think with this is the time, and to not be I think players should not be shy about testing different elements. I think wind, water, and fire all have interesting ideas to try. I think different mixes of Astra cards need to be experimented with. There are packages of Astra cards that are pretty good in different ways. And I think this card makes Arasana warrant testing. So please start testing, start sharing your results. Let's figure out how to make this girl on the map, because Lineage Break Cam needs this, guys. He needs it. If Arasana isn't playable after this, Lineage Break Cam, I don't know if he's playing Grand Archive anymore. I think he's just done at this point, because I would be in a complete pit of despair after all of this, and my favorite girl still is not playable.
Yep. No, let's do our best, everyone. Let's come together as a community and really, bring it home, not just for Lineage Break Cam, but for all the honest RO lovers out there.
No, #SaveCam. All right. That's what I want. Commented down below. I want #SaveCam in the comments.
All right. Well, that is an excellent way to end the show this week, I think. On a beautiful just gleam of hope riding into the sunset here, and let's get some fire ideas here going. Pun not intended, because I think water might actually be a really good Arasana build. But let's get some fire ideas here for Singapore and really, bring some results home and have a really good time. So yeah, good luck everybody in your Arasana testing. But for now, this has been the Recollection Step. We will see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you very much for listening. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, 5-star review us on whatever podcast platform you are listening on, and have a good couple of weeks.
#SaveCam.